grant them prima nocte. First night, when any common girl inhabiting their lands is married, our nobles shall have sexual rights to her on the night of her wedding. If we can't get them out, we'll breed them out. If we can't get them out, we'll breed them out. If we can't get them out, we'll breed them out. If we can't get them out, we'll breed them out.
Chatah Imanyampa, Halito Chim Achukma Alm Achukma Yakoki. In the indigenous Chatah tongue, greetings, how are you? I'm good, and thank you for listening to my video titled, Why I Prefer Not to Be Called Indian. I'm Nura Chatah Istachata Tupanamba Ohoyo Api Hama, Upaluma Pisa, Indigenous Aboriginal woman, happy to be unseen, not recognized by colonizers. Before starting, I want to share what I've learned about my Iksa, Chuka Achefa, Oklushi/clan family nation's true heritage. I am extremely grateful. On mother's and father's side, I have ancient roots in now called Alabama, North America, and Brazil, South America. The offspring and blending of indigenous Aborigine, Alabama, Chatah, Istachata, and Tupi, Oklachefa tribes. Ha-Bama is the original tribal name of Alabama meaning cleared thicket. Istachata is the original name of what the colonizers call Creek Indians. Aniyunwiya is the original name of the Tala, G, that the colonizers call Cherokee, and Tala, G, is a Creek Muskogee word for speakers of another language. Tala, G were also known as Muskogee, before the colonizers' word, Creek, meaning river. South along the Atlantic coast of Brazil where Ka-CK was replaced by the colonizer word, chief. Tupanamba was the original name of one of the Tupi tribes of my ancestors. Chatah is the original tribal name, meaning growth, elevated assurance against doubt. So, don't get the indigenous Chatah mixed up with the colonizers' bastardized Choctaw word, usually written as Chaktaw or Choctaw, and sounds similar to real Chatah. An Indian by the name of Pushmataha was given the position of general by the de facto U.S. colonizer government corporation, and recognized as one of their legendary greats. They also called him Chief Choctaw. Pushmataha was born 1765 somewhere near the Mississippi, and like the sycophant, or informer kiss-ass for favors, of the day, this nigga was a disgrace. A betrayer of indigenous Shawnee, Istachata Creek and Chatah people for personal ill-gotten gains. He persuaded some Chatahs to fight alongside the U.S. colonizers against Shawnee, Tecumseh, who advocated intertribal unity, through his Federation of Southern Indigenous that resisted European/Caucasian, pale-faced white rule, during the 1813 to 1814 Creek War. Having no consent and no authority whatsoever to speak on behalf of all indigenous Aborigine of Turtle Island, Pushmataha made it easy for the U.S. colonizers to take occupation of our lands, by signing the fraud contract Treaty of Mount Dexter, bearing the bastardized Choctaw word. Thus, illegitimately, ceded, gave away much of our lands in Alabama and Mississippi, for foreign white occupancy. Congress's 1790 Naturalization Act, still in effect, emigrated only European/Caucasian white races to their union of colonies on our land. Sellout nigga Indian, Pushma Taha, died in D.C. Washington District of Christopher Columbus 1824. Why I prefer not to be called Indian. It is every other indigenous Aborigines' own right to choose. In this review of the word Indian, all references to the colonizers' legal definitions will be from Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, 1st, 2nd, and revised 4th editions, years 1891 through 1968. Ever since the invasion, conquest, and colonization of what is now called the Americas, major problems have culminated with foreign terminology. The word Indian, like America, Asia, Africa, Moor, etc., are not indigenous words to this part of Earth Mother. The legal definition of conquest, page 375 in international law, is the acquisition of the sovereignty of a country by force of arms, exercised by an independent power which reduces the vanquished to the submission of its empire. An intricate function of conquest and colonization is land theft, the abduction of the indigenous, and holding us captive against our will. The United States colonizers have also committed these atrocities by their legal system of paper. This other form of theft is called collective naturalization. Page 1178. Collective naturalization takes place when the conquering colonizer government, by treaty or cession, acquires the whole or part of the territory of a foreign nation of the indigenous, stealing, and takes to itself the inhabitants thereof, kidnapping, clothing them with the rights of citizenship either by the terms of the treaty, or by subsequent legislation, held hostage. They make up rules and regulations by decree or command to their benefit on foreign lands they have invaded. The generational conflict is between indigenous age-old, and diverse traditions, cultures, our natural thought processes, against the colonizing invasive species of European/Caucasian, so-called white people, European/African/Moor, so-called Negro people, and niggas, like Christopher Columbus that came just yesterday, and redefined everything, renaming everything, replacing our indigenous tongues. An invasive species is an organism that is not indigenous to a particular area, and in countless ways, causes great harm to its newfound area. An invasive species also occurs as humans, and as a result of human activities, beyond its accepted normal expanse, imposing devastating effects on valued environmental, agricultural, and indigenous social orders, on psychological and physical levels, along with the destruction of resources that the foreign species depletes while encroaching and overpopulating its new environment. Unlike the colonizers, we value ecstatic knowledge that hold profound inner meanings to us. It communicates beyond physical time and space, then manifests in countless unique expressions of light and sound, clothed in words. This extraordinary occurrence is evident in the multitude of our destroyed languages that expressed who we are. Our self-identification originating from within, for ourselves, as part of our self-awareness, is not respected by the so-called civilized foreigners. However, the complicated, confused, and materialistic colonizers are too ravenous, too worldly, too deaf, and blind for indigenous reality to ever surface in their imperialistic thought processes, they call civilized. Colonizers want to keep our diverse uniqueness lumped into one Indian label fiction for the construction of their citizenship vessels for smooth sailing of control in amassing larger insatiable accumulations of commerce. The illusions imposed by the invasive species to counter the true indigenous aborigine will never be successful since we are of truth, and its effect of expanding our awareness, eventually showing us the way through their tricks and traps. We don't travel thousands of miles from our lands to conquer, kill, steal, and annihilate populations. The word Indian, like Negro, black, red, yellow, colored, African American, etc., is but a mere status fiction in the colonizers' feudal maze of materialism, and forced political and economic control of people, places, and things. Indian is another backdoor to steal. Page 751. The legal fiction of law definition is something known to be false, is assumed to be true. Indian, like fictitious name, is a counterfeit, feigned, or pretended name taken by a person, differing in some essential particular from his true name, with the implication that it is meant to deceive or mislead. The colonizers have these type definitions in their so-called law dictionaries because their definitions tell us what these strangers are. How they think.
You should know that when you accept my definitions of the fictions that I made up for you, like Indian, colored, Negro, Black, African American, Moor, etc., I can rule you. I can rule you using fictions because what I make up is mine. Look at so-called constitutions, treaties, trusts, etc., that you think belongs to you. Read these contracts, then ask yourself, do you really know what they stipulate? Do these contracts benefit the indigenous Aboriginal on your own land, or benefit me, the foreigner, on your own land? Wise up and let go of my fictions.
United States colonizers steal from everyone on Earth Mother, then make laws or legal fictions, clothe the indigenous with the Indian legal fiction, so these victims never get back what was stolen from them, since they are wearing the Indian fiction, created by their conquerors, and owners of the Indian fiction. According to the Colonizer's Guidebook to Working with Non-Federally Recognized Indian Tribes, however, disguised as preserving so-called Indian history, on page 2, subtitled, Terminology. The term Indian is a mere status in their fraud system of imperialism. Quote, it should be understood at the outset that the term Indian tribe is defined in the National Historic Preservation Act as an Indian tribe, band, nation, or other organized group or community, including a native village, regional corporation, or village corporation, that is recognized as eligible for the special programs and services provided by the United States to Indians, because of their status as Indians. End quote. Therefore, like welfare, the term Indian refers to federally recognized, eligible for special pacification and welfare handouts provided by the United States, because of their status as Indians. The word Indian is one of the colonizers' created fictional constructs, and used to steal the birthright lands of my people, so why would I want to identify myself with that? However, who'd ever wish to identify themselves as Indian, for reasons where the foreign colonizers require it for those that care about being recognized, by all means. Less power to them. The decisions of those to be identified as Indian are their own, like Pan-African. It has nothing to do with me. Page 1580, the colonizer's status, is in part, quote, a legal personal relationship, not temporary in its nature nor terminable at the mere will of the parties, with which third persons and the state are concerned." End quote. Meaning, by the consent of those that want to have this personal relationship with the colonizer within its foreign system of fraud, under their foreign definition of Indian status, this contract cannot be terminated simply because he or she does not want to be the colonizer's dependent or subject anymore. Page 1594, subject means, bound to obey the colonizer's laws. Subject to: liable, subordinate, subservient, inferior, obedient to, governed or affected by. Also, status means, in the colonizer's law dictionary, quote, "It also means a state, because it signifies the condition or circumstances in which one stands with regard to his property." End quote. Therefore, if anyone knowingly agrees to be under the status of Indian, in which the colonizer refers to as native, the same law dictionary, page 1176, the definition of native is a natural-born subject or citizen, a denizen by birth, one who owes his domicile or citizenship to the fact of his birth within the country referred to. And a denizen, page 522, means, the conferring of the privileges of citizenship upon an alien born. Question: Are you an alien on your own land? Online Black's Law Dictionary, 2nd edition. Native. Nativitas, Latin for nativity/birth. Villanage, that state in which men were born slaves. Question: Are you a slave? A base tenure, where a man holds upon terms of doing whatsoever is commanded of him, nor knows in the evening what is to be done in the morning, and is always bound to an uncertain service. End quote. Therefore, in the civil colonizer's system, Indian status is a slave. Slaves can't own property. Page 1559. Slave: a person who is wholly subject to the will of another, one who has no freedom of action, but whose person and services are wholly under the control of another. The condition of a slave, that civil relation in which one man has absolute power over the life, fortune, and liberty of another. Again, slaves, Indians, can't have property. They remain on some dependent form of welfare. But, look. Colonizers deceive. They master the art of illusion, making things appear other than what they really are. So, when one becomes aware of the illusion, in which Indian is one of them, one stops claiming the illusion that binds them. Also, the Colonizer's Guidebook to Working with Non-Federally Recognized Tribes, reads in part, quote, "The federal government has a trust responsibility to Indian tribes that it does not have with non-federally recognized tribes. And, the federal government works with Indian tribes on a nation-to-nation basis but does not do so with any other indigenous groups." End quote. Question: What is this so-called nation-to-nation relationship and so-called trust responsibility that the colonizers have with the Indian status of federally recognized Indian tribe? The legal status of Indian is a dependent, and a ward of the colonizer government, and in the colonizer's constitution Indians are not taxed. This tax exemption, as a part of their colonizers' pacification scheme of providing welfare benefits in various disguised ways and means, as long as Mr. and Mrs. Indian status adopts the ways of a civilized life, while tied to an Indian tribe on a reservation, or the aforementioned organizations and/or corporations, in which the purpose of a reservation is to bring the Indian under de facto U.S. government control, to minimize conflict between Indians and settler colonizers, and to assimilate them in the ways of the European/Caucasian white races, under the name Indian. Indians can't own land, so they can't build equity. Meaning of equity in the colonizer's system would be like if you were buying a house, and you owed $150,000 on your loan, and your home value is worth $200,000, so you would have $50,000 of equity in your home. You could build so-called wealth in their system, if you decide to sell it. The $50,000 equity you built over time will come back to you in the sale. For example, if you paid off the $200,000 home loan, and sold the house for $250,000, you would receive the cash difference of $50,000 in equity when the sale closes. If you had undeveloped land outright, say, from an ancestor, and the land was valued at $200,000 in the colonizer's system, using the land as collateral, you could borrow against the land's value, or land equity loan, to buy something else. Reservation land is held in trust for Indians by the colonizer federal government. The goal of this policy was to keep Indians contained to certain lands. A ward, in the colonizer's system, is a minor or incapacitated adult placed under the protection of a legal guardian/government entity, by their court. Also, under the provisions of the July 4, 1884 Homestead Act of Colonizer Congress, 23 U.S. statutes, page 90, as long as they have severed their tribal relations, and adopt a civilized life, the act gave the Indian the right to file for an allotment of a specific tract of public lands, where the colonizing government holds the title in trust for them for a period of 5 to 25 years to lands patented to the Indian. No taxes are paid during that period. Afterwards, an unencumbered title is vested by another patent. The Indian becomes a U.S. citizen paying regular taxes like the rest.
Nakfi Intek. Brothers and sisters, I have to say this to you in my own voice. I would like for you to read this Indian rejection letter from the U.S. Colonizers Indian Affairs Office as a reply to a woman asking their permission for Indian recognition and identification. But she was denied. It says, quote, "In reply, I wish to inform you that you are not an Indian as defined by the Indian Act." End quote. Excuse me. Now, using natural good sense, this tells us that Indian status, like all of the other fictions such as Negro, Black, Colored, Red, Moor, and African American, so on, are the property of the conquerors of our land and of our people. And it is one of their requirements in their system to ask these foreign occupiers through their U.S. Indian Affairs corporate offices. We have to ask them permission to be recognized and identified by the same invader colonizers as one of their fictions. As the rejection letter writes, quote, "defined by the Indian Act." Now again, this Indian Act is a colonizer law, which is foreign to us. And remember, just like a driver's license and a registration, 1, Indian is not a real living being, and 2, Indian status has to be renewed. Decreed by the popes of Rome, who regarded themselves as having power to grant titles to portions of the earth for purposes of spreading Christian so-called civilization, the Roman Curia operators defined supreme authority as a divine right of the rulers, in which legal, political, and economic power dominate their law as the rulers. Now, this Roman invasive species asserted sovereignty over all indigenous Aborigine people based on their theology or religious dogma. In this case, we're talking about Christianity, European Spain, Portugal, France, England, etc., colonizers specifically based their false sovereignty claims on Christian dogma decreed by the popes of Rome. Even though a great many of us still hold on to this fiction, I have learned and accepted that being Indian starts with colonialism. All indigenous nations were stripped of our independence by the foreign term legally within a foreign colonial system, and all lands of the indigenous Aborigine was treated as legally vacant. In Latin they say terra nullius, which is why we, the indigenous Aborigine, were declared to have a right to occupancy but not own our lands. Only the foreign colonizers can do that. Now, in 1823, a case, Johnson versus McIntosh, the Supreme Court adopted for the United States colonizers the right of occupancy, their basic legal position of their federal Indian law that transfers so-called divine powers to the secular state. An example of the secular state would be the United States of America, aka United States operators that claim to be officially neutral in matters of religion, but in reality, all of its institutions, everything is based on that. Point being, under the colonial United States system, externally defined Indian fiction has no sovereignty. However, supreme authority rests in the illusory divine right of the conquering rulers that occupy our lands today, that includes their entire court/justice system. Speaking indigenously Chatah, ohoyo, apuhuma, as a naturally born indigenous Aboriginal woman of my own homeland, where I stand right now, I have learned and don't need to ask the foreign colonizing liars, thieves, and murderers of my flesh and blood people permission or to be recognized by them, clothed in one of their fictions, through their divinely and wicked system. I am who I am, and I am what my people called ourselves in our own indigenous tongues before the invasion, before these foreign colonizers. Not Indian, which is what the conquerors want me to accept. They want me to accept their foreign definition of me, but I'm not that. We cannot expect to permanently detach from this wicked stronghold operating halfway if we truly want to expel colonialism along with its colonizers and get our land back. We have to denounce and reject all of it, all the way, to experience the future that we intend, that we want to happen.
The colonizers' recognition of me, or not, has absolutely no weight. Because I am a true indigenous Aboriginal, not looking for trinkets from smiling, brutal foreign enemies who are in occupation of my homeland, that they slaughtered my ancestors, and stole my heritage, and then, falsely claimed and took the indigenous Aborigine as citizen subjects without our consent, through their fraud act of Congress, termed collective naturalization. Look. Of all private U.S. agricultural land, the foreign European/Caucasian races of white migrants account for 96% of the land owners, 97% of the value, and 98% of the acres. Yet, we're confined on reservations, wards, as renters, mortgage and land tributaries. Look. Do you not realize that they need us to be in Indian status, or the other label brands, to keep us off our lands they now say they own? Colonizers must go home. They are all frauds. All institutions built by them are all built on fraud. The colonizers' fictions of Indian, black, Negro, colored, red, yellow, federal, city, state, county, are all created through fraud, and their constitutions, treaties, trusts, all contracts, are all based on fraud. One of the colonizers' own legal doctrines is, anything that's derived from an original crime, such as fraud, is termed, fruit of the poisonous tree. Therefore, all produced institutions, papers, etc., aka, fruit, from their original fraud, is deadly poison, aka, not legitimate, as well. Don't call me Indian, I am of indigenous Chatah and Creek blood. Not the colonizer's citizen, regardless of recorded papers, certificates, or computerized data he produced. There was never willful consent to his false claim and imposition that my ancestors and me were his citizens. The invasive colonizer species are incapable of accepting me and my indigenous Aboriginal kinfolk for who we are. The word, Indian, as in, the black, red, Negro-colored, Moor, Moorish, and African American, etc., brands, are mere generalizations and for the colonizer's convenience. Recognizing and being our true Aboriginal and Indigenous selves on our own land, creates a major inconvenience to the colonizer. So, we need to refuse to be convenient for them. It's impossible for the diabolical nature of the colonizing enemy invasive species to ever change. The indigenous Aborigine of this land, is his sustenance. Look, we will never, ever, receive help from the enemy. The overstayed, and still not welcomed colonizers occupying our land, that they stole through fraud treaties, contracts, constitutions, trusts, and genocide, try to appear respectable, as they continue to lie from their White House, and governor houses, wearing suit and tie uniforms. Colonizer Washington, District of Christopher Columbus operators, must leave. Indian is needed to lump indigenous diversity together, like sardines, which is a Greek word from the Mediterranean island called Sardinia, meaning, to pack closely, the different types of unique fish cramped into a tin. Being all packed closely and identified by the colonizer's standards of labeling, conveniently hides our diversity, and our true uniqueness stemming from insight and awareness of ourselves, in the original manner in which we identified ourselves, in our own true names that we gave to ourselves, in our own indigenous tongues. The Indian status brand, just like the other brands, is convenient for the colonizer to acquire the world's material, commerce, and trade, making it easier and more profitable from a land that is not his own, since he has no land of his own, because he quit his own country to colonize ours, but in order to keep living his material life of luxury and control, the colonizer needs to displace us, to be replaced by the desires of the colonizers. He needs to displace what is most valuable to us and get us desensitized. In other words, get us conditioned enough to make us less likely to oppose the colonizer's theft of what is valuable to us. Example, the colonizer's constitutions and treaties, allow the colonizer, by indigenous consent, to populate our lands with foreigners of his choosing, keep him in occupation and control of our lands, control our livelihoods, goods, and property, tax us, etc. Yet, the indigenous Aborigine will refer to these same documents, the colonizer never honors anyway, unless it benefits him and his stay, as something that will relieve them of the injustices that the very same colonizer commits against them, as if he and his documents, in the name of the labels, like Indian, that he created in his foreign tongue, will solve their problems, and save them, albeit, in his foreign court system. When in fact, the indigenous have become desensitized, and are not opposing these colonizer instruments that are really by our consent for the colonizers to continue use of their instruments in taking, and keeping what is valuable to us away, which is our liberty, being adapt in physical and inner truths shared amongst ourselves in our own ways, here at home, through our true lineage, living our own lives, and enjoying our own land absent the foreign colonizers whose place is back in his own Europe, across the water somewhere far away from our land. Indian, like the rest, is a demeaning and reductive fiction, originated from colonizing foreigners, and imposed on us by his foreign tongue. Indian was never spoken, or thought of, prior to colonization. Someone said, quote, "How I loathe the term Indian. Indian is used to sell things, souvenirs, cigars, cigarettes, gasoline, cars. Indian is a figment of the white man's imagination." End quote. Lenore Kishig Tobias, Ojibwe, 1990. Ya ko ki, ha chi pesak la chike. Thank you for listening.
Kechi Kila Anchimaka. I love you, Mother Earth.